Welcome to Undercurrents of Romance, the show that celebrates every subgenre of romantic fiction. In each episode, I peel back the layers of your favorite love stories and chat with the talented authors who bring them to life. I'm your host, Tracey Devlyn. Now, let's dive in with today's guest. Hello, Romantics. I'm here with USA Today best-selling author Mimi Matthews to talk about her new historical romance, Rules for Ruin. Welcome to the show, Mimi.
Hi, so thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. What a great book. I loved this. My roots are in historical romance, so anytime I get one coming across my podcast desk, I lap them up. It was such a treat to read this.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, from your website, I see that you're an equestrian, and I was curious, did you watch the Kentucky Derby this Saturday? This past Saturday?
I don't know if this is going to be controversial for me to say, but I
Oh,
can't really watch horse racing. I
yeah,
feel so bad for the horses. They start them so young. And
yeah.
when I was a young rider, some friends of ours had racehorses, and the ones that don't succeed, the off the track thoroughbreds, were sort of
Uh-huh.
available to good homes. So I, growing up, had two separate off the track thoroughbreds. And
Ah.
so I love the horses, but sometimes the racing, I'm so worried somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah, it was we watched it. I've not I wouldn't call myself a Kentucky Derby fan. I have a good friend who's very big into horses and she watches it every year. So that got me to watching it in the last few years. But I the muddy track, I felt so bad because the horses were just covered in
Oh
mud.
my gosh.
Yeah, it was really bad. But so I had to ask since the Derby was just this past Saturday. So
It's always
um
exciting. I sort of like to hear about it.
yeah.
But yeah, I haven't watched the racing that much. I used to watch the dressage more often because that's what I rode
Okay.
dressage when
Yeah.
when it was time for Olympic dressage. And even that I've fallen off a little bit.
Mm.
I'm a bad equestrian.
That's quite all right. Well, it's that, based on what I saw on your website and the publications that you have coming out and everything, I think you're probably a little busy to do a lot of
Oh
that
man,
extra stuff,
it's
right?
been really busy lately. The good kind of busy, but
Yeah.
sometimes even the good kind of busy is still a lot.
Yes,
Um,
yes, for sure. Sure. Well, why don't you get us started? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe tell us about your writing journey as well, if you don't mind.
sure. So I'm a lawyer and an author. I write mainly Victorian romance, but I also have two nonfiction, historical nonfiction books published with a publisher in England, mostly on Victorian history. Um, my journey is this long circuitous journey. I wrote my first book when I was 13. I got my first agent when I was 18, and that book didn't sell. Which for people who aren't writers, that is not uncommon that your first books don't sell. Um, and then, I went to college and law school and all this other stuff. And what ended up happening is I had a bad car accident and I hurt my neck really bad. And I had to have a series of surgeries. And ultimately, after one of the surgeries where I had a bone fusion, the bone broke. And so I
Mm,
had sort of really traumatic injury. And it was while I was on bed rest after one of the surgeries to repair the break and I was very low that I came back to writing fiction as sort of an escape. And
hmm.
by that point, my agent I had had when I was young had passed away. And so I got a new agent and started chopping things. And in the end, what I did was my first Victorian romance, The Lost Letter, when it finally got an offer, it was from a digital first publisher. And this was sort of when self-publishing, indie publishing was first starting
Yes.
to take off. So I declined the offer and instead put it out myself. So my first few books were indies that ended up being really successful. Um,
Great.
and then I signed with Berkeley at Penguin Random House for another few separate series. So I've got a little bit of things everywhere
Yeah.
in every format, which I think is a great way to do it, frankly.
Yeah.
Um, have a little bit everywhere.
It's a be best of both worlds, wouldn't you say? You know,
Oh,
with the
absolutely.
independent publishing, there are things there that maybe that you can write and explore that might not be as accepted in traditional publishing. Plus, you get a little bit more hand in some of the things that are fun, like the cover design and that sort of thing. And then with the traditional publishing, you've got a team behind you, which is great. That's a
Yeah,
wonderful
yeah.
feeling. And then they also can get your book maybe in some areas that you cannot do as easily, at
Right.
least, with
Right.
independent publishing.
For me, for my indies, the I don't keep any of the sub rights. So the audio, large print, foreign translation, all those sell to traditional publishers. So luckily they're in my indies are in a lot of places.
Great.
But I find there's good and bad about both things. And so
Oh,
it's
yeah.
nice to be in both
Yeah.
worlds. That way, whenever
Yeah.
you're disgruntled about one of the worlds, you can lean into the other one. I can be like,
It's
focus
so
on this
true.
one now.
Yes, it is so true. Oh, gosh, you're saying all the things that I've felt over the years myself, whenever I was hybrid as well. But yeah, no, that's great. And we're audio only right now, but whenever folks are looking at this on YouTube, there will be a nice graphic on there that will include the part of will include your book cover. Sorry, I'm stuttering here. We'll include a picture of your book cover. So, as I'm talking about your book cover, which is amazing, by the way, it to me it has like a Deanna Raybourn, Veronica
Oh, yes.
Speedwell vibe to it.
Yeah, she has beautiful covers.
She does, doesn't she? And this reminded me of that, and it's funny because I was thinking, like, gosh, your heroine Effie is just as courageous and witty as Veronica Speedwell. So maybe that's why I loved the book.
Oh,
Not
I
the only
love that.
reason, but
I think
that's one of the reasons I loved
that
it
is
so
a
much.
really, I love Deanna Raybourne's work and Deanna Raybourne. She actually endorsed my first nonfiction book.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she's like really great, but yeah, super high praise.
Yeah, good, good, good. Well, what can you tell us about this story? I believe it's the first in a new series, and maybe how you came up with this Crinoline Academy, which is a great name, by the way. How did that come to you?
Well, I have an English lit degree, my undergrad degree, and probably even if I didn't, I would still have been inspired by this. But I love Victorian literature. I love a lot of the classics from that era. And one of my favorite books is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. And in
Mhm.
it, he has the character of Miss Havisham, who
Mhm.
is famously jilted on her wedding day, and she sinks into madness. She remains in her wedding dress for decades. Her cake is
Yeah.
rotting in her dining room. All the clocks are set to the time she was abandoned. But
Uh-huh.
she takes in these adopted girls, and during the course of Great Expectation, the one you see is named Estella, these beautiful orphans. And she says at one point in the story that she's fashioning Estella to be her weapon of vengeance against men, to sort of make up for,
Uh,
because Miss Havisham has a lot of bitterness toward the male sex. And I always thought that was such an intriguing idea, and I liked the idea in my story that instead of just, an eccentric woman bringing an orphan into her house, that this is a charity school for girls, and the woman, who has sort of a similar experience to Miss Havisham, is instead sort of fashioning the best and brightest of the girls in her charity school. So not all the girls, but the best and brightest into weapons to sort of take down the patriarchy, and not in these dramatic ways, because I've tried to anchor the story really realistically in Victorian history. So there's not a lot of, Charlie's Angels spy things, in case people were expecting that.
yeah.
But there is, a lot of the subversive things that women were doing that were authentic to the era, which I think are still
Hmm.
pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Um, and so Miss Corvus, summons Euphemia Flight, Effie, the main character, uh, back home from Paris, and tasks her with taking down this misogynistic politician. And Effie is ready to do it. But the politician is also sort of the cat's paw of an underworld, betting shop owner who's, a villain basically, who's
Yeah.
using the politician for his own ends. And he has no interest in Effie d
Taking them
damaging
down.
this
Yeah.
politician. Yeah. So the story is not so much Effie and the politician, it's Effie and Gabriel Royce, the betting shop owner, and how they have to engage in this cat and mouse game so that they can both get what they want.
Yeah. No, it's such a great setup. And when I was reading it, I actually recalled, I don't know if you've heard this or not, I'm sure you have, but author Linda Howard's famous quote came to mind, and it was, if your hero is a firefighter, your heroine had better be an arsonist, right?
I
And
hadn't heard that. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's great.
it's so perfect, right? You're establishing that conflict between your two main protagonists right up front, and so there's your story it's slightly different, but that conflict that she's talking about is still there, and yet you gave them this really cool connection point by through their backgrounds. And I thought that
Yeah.
that was just masterful on your part
Oh,
as well.
thank you.
So, yeah, you've got this huge conflict because they want different things, but then they can also connect through their backgrounds. They're in this world that they don't really belong in,
Oh, both of
yet,
them. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah,
And they've sort of forged identities or sort of a veneer of an identity in each of their respective worlds. But when they meet each other and they really see each other, they sort of recognize each other as Gabriel says, like recognizes like. That's
right,
something you said in the
yes,
story. And
yeah,
and it's sort of they recognize that sameness in each other, and it's almost a I sometimes have been saying it's a little bit of a soulmate romance, but it's not like
mm,
first love at first sight, nothing like that.
yeah,
But it's when they see themselves, when they see each other, behind the mask, as as it
mm-hmm,
were,
yeah.
they have that recognition, and it's very powerful because these are two people who have mostly moved through their lives alone.
Yes, yes. I love there was just something so seductive about they're both they're both kind of alphas in their own way.
Oh yes.
She doesn't he doesn't intimidate her and she doesn't intimidate him at all. I mean, it's just so delicious and I really love these two characters a lot. So
Oh,
thank
I'm
you
so
for
glad.
this. Yeah,
I'm
it's
hoping everybody
wonderful.
else will too. It's a tiny
Yeah.
bit of typical books, just in the sense that Effie is more of a badass.
Mm-hmm.
She's not, and I do write, more sort of more feminist characters who are, intelligent and
Yeah.
taking the reins of their own life. But Effie was definitely on a different level. The way she moves through the world and the
Yeah.
confidence she has, but also the vulnerability about some things in her past and how that affects
Mm-hmm.
her. But yeah, I had
Yeah.
such a blast writing her.
I think it's like the underlying danger that they both present that makes them so attractive. You know that they're both capable of doing what they need to do to get out of any situation.
Right,
And
right.
yeah, it was there's a lot of layers and texture to it. One of the things that I like to dive into on this show is finding the story's undercurrent with the author. It's that second beating heart of the story that flows beneath the lover's journey and typically helps propel the story forward. Do you, what do you think is the undercurrent that's flowing beneath Effie and Gabriel's love story?
I feel like a lot of it is this really sort of gritty, gothic, almost dark academia-esque Dickensian um, atmosphere that's sort of permeating the story as you move through sort of the full breadth of London, from the slums to the
Hmm.
ballrooms. You see, the criminals, the working classes, the topmost layer of fashionable society, the politics, the politicians. Um, and all that it represents and how the characters connect to this world that was so broad and had so many disparate little sort of pockets of people, that were so far removed from each other, even if they were close to them, in proximity, but just as far as their rank and their positions and the lives they were living were so distant from each other. And you have two characters in Effie and Gabriel that are moving through this almost in a fluid way where they don't really belong in any one place. They don't really have a connection. And it's just the sort of found family dynamic of when they find
Hmm.
each other,
Yeah.
and what it means to be in this world at that time, where it was so sort of dark and gritty. And I don't know if unstable is the right word to describe it, but the 1860s, I mean,
Yeah.
this was a time where there was dramatic change happening in the world,
Hmm.
technology, politics, um, mobility of the working classes. You had people in trade, you had just all kinds of different things happening, which which was a little bit destabilizing, as well as like in the story you had clearances and but there was no they didn't put the people in the slums anywhere else. It was just taking away where they lived. There was a lot of
Yeah.
uncertainty and a lot of instability. And ultimately, I think what Gabriel and Effie find is this found family and this sense of stability and belonging in each other, which
Hmm.
makes it even more powerful because of this undercurrent of uncertainty and sort of grittiness and darkness in the atmosphere. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does, and I can see that. I totally agree with you. I think that that was quite evident throughout the story. Absolutely. One of the questions I like to ask sometimes is, and especially since you have a lot of different books under your belt now, is there a story that you would love to write but haven't either found the time or for whatever reason just to take that plunge yet? Is there a story out there, or have you written it? Is there a story you've
Well,
already written that was like one that you had been hoping to write for a while?
there was one like that. I wrote a sort of mashup between Jane Eyre and Dracula called
Yeah.
John Eyre. And
Ah,
it would oh my gosh, I had so much fun writing it, but it had a supernatural elements and it was also obviously a retelling of two classic
yeah.
stories, but merging them into one
Hmm.
story. Um And it was one of those things where I thought, are people going to read this? I don't know. Is anybody else going to enjoy this as much as I do? Didn't know about that either. Um, but it actually, it found its readers who really liked it. But mainly it was just one of those things that I remember joking about it with my family a lot, long before I
Yeah.
wrote it, about, as soon as I finish this, then I can write John Eyre. And finally I did write it. And but yeah, and so I've had other ideas since then. I was talking to another interviewer who does a gothic podcast, that she
Hmm.
reminded me that back at the time John Eyre came out, which has been quite a few years ago, I mentioned doing a mashup of Wuthering Heights with werewolves, and she's like, "Are you going to write that?" And I thought, "Oh, I totally forgot about that." That's another one I've thought. So it's always something a little bit crazy like that is
Yeah.
tempting me. But it's one of those things where it's it they really are passion projects because you
Yeah.
don't know if they're going to have an audience. So it might be a big chunk of time during which you've lost opportunities for other
Yeah.
work or lost money because you're doing this crazy project. But maybe
Well,
one day I'll.
it's funny that you say that because I'm trying to remember. I'm tempted to go on the internet and find it real quick, but it was there was many years ago there was a mashup similar to that. It was a Jane Austen, and I want to say, was it Frankenstein or
Oh,
uh,
it
Dracula?
Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
There you go. That's what it was. So I
Yes,
mean, that was a pretty big bestseller. So there's got to be
there's
there,
got to
you know,
be
if you,
some.
yeah, if you can tap into it somehow, you got to figure
Yeah,
out how
I
to
know.
tap
Wouldn't
into
that
it.
be
Yeah.
great? Well, when
Yeah.
John Eyre came out, it was my first book that got chosen by the Historical Novel Association as an
Ah,
editor's choice pick.
nice.
So it did get some recognition and it made some lists like best recent vampire fiction, things like that. But did it sell as well as my historical romances? No, it did
Well,
not.
and I think that's okay. I'm maybe publishers would have a different opinion about it, but it's like, it's authors need to be able to kind of cleanse the palette from time
Oh,
to
right.
time,
And write
and
something you really love. And if you
yeah,
feel like you've been writing in the same, not the same universe in terms of like it's all in the same world with the same extended cast of characters, but just in the
yeah,
same universe, like all your books are set in the same century and you're sort of got the same sort of things, that sometimes you can just burn out and you want to do
yeah,
something a
for
little bit
sure.
different, a little bit crazy, and like something you could sort of play with and have fun with.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. All right. Well, here's a couple of fun questions. What are two or three tropes that readers can look forward to while reading Rules of Ruin? I'm sorry, Rules for Ruin.
I the first one is probably rivals to lovers. I wouldn't say they're enemies to lovers, but definitely
Yeah.
they start out as rivals and they remain rivals for a very long time in the story, even at the same time they're falling in
Yeah.
love. The other one is definitely found family, just
Yeah.
finding those connections, people who don't have fa blood family around them and the
Hmm.
connections they make, friendships, close friendships, the romantic element, the people who have stepped into their lives to act as parents and what that
Yeah.
means. So
Yeah.
found family is a really big thing. And the other one too, like I mentioned before, I would say probably soulmates of when you meet somebody who you really feel that kinship with, that connection and
Hmm.
recognition, which is what happens between Effie and Gabriel.
Yeah. No, I love those. Those are great tropes. Have you read a romance novel recently that you loved and would recommend, and maybe tell us why?
I get to read so many great ones early. So I have a couple ones I read recently, of all, not just historicals,
Yeah.
but like
Hmm.
contemporaries too. And
Yeah.
so one I read that's not out till July. It's by Amy Berry. It's called Seven Brides for Beau McBride. And it's like I think it's the third in her series, which I had when the first one came out, I had read that one too. But she writes about it's sort of the Old West and it's mail order brides. But sort of one of the hooks in her stories is it's all these brothers, the McBride brothers,
Uh-huh.
and they have a really ornery little sister, Junebug. And Junebug's the one who's placing these advertisements for their wives. And in Seven Brides for Beau McBride, she places seven and she corresponds as if she's her brother, and seven women travel out to marry him. And she's
Uh,
organizing them and she keeps calling them my brides. It is hilarious. It
that
is
sounds
oh
great.
my gosh. And there's still a romance in it, and
Yeah.
but just the comedic elements, it was just so clever and
Yeah.
really hilarious. The
Oh,
sister totally steals the show, and I'm
yeah.
waiting for when the sister's eventually, I know, going to get a romance of her own, but
Mm,
just the bane of these brothers' existence.
yeah, yeah. I love the name too, Junebug. That's great.
Isn't that cute?
It's so cute. So cute. Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
also, I should mention, just for people who prefer contemporaries, I read the new Sarah Adler book called Finders Keepers that's out in June.
Okay.
And Danica Nava, who's a new author, she is Native American and she wrote the first Native American romance. Um, she's got her second book out called Love is a War Song. I read that too. That's out in July. And those are both excellent, like just so good.
Okay.
And again, they're contemporary. So if you only like historical, they might not be your cup of tea, but I love historical too. And I read them
Yeah.
and I just thought they were fantastic, funny,
Yeah.
clever, really smart, just really smart. And of course, both incredibly romantic stories.
No, that's great. I feel like back whenever I first started writing, that people were a little bit more, that readers, I should say, stayed a little bit more in their particular lanes. Like if they loved historical, they read historical, and they didn't venture to. I was that way. That's pretty much all I read for a number of years. But I feel like that's changed. I feel like people read more widely across genres now. So I'm sure there's still some that stick to their lanes, but I feel like there's a lot more crossover these days.
Oh yeah, and you never know when you're going to find a new favorite author or you're going to find something that you love in a different genre that you didn't even realize you love till you till you read it.
Yes.
So it's all I
Yeah.
think it's always great to try new things. And if you don't want to have any commitment until you love it, the library is very great for that. You just
Yeah.
check out stuff, try stuff, and then, you never know, might find your new favorite author. And a lot of the authors you love write in many different genres. So
Oh, yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
good way to try things too.
Yeah, for sure. All righty. Well, before we go, can you give us a hint of what's up next? Any exciting projects you can talk about? Maybe book two in the series or something?
Yes. So the second book in the Crinoline Academy series is called The Marriage Method, and
Okay.
it's going to be out. I think my publisher has it slated for November. So it's only,
Nice.
I think, what is that, 6 months after Rules for
Yeah.
Ruin comes out. So
Yeah.
pretty
That's
quick.
great. Yeah.
And it's the story, you'll meet the supporting characters that become the hero and heroine of the marriage method in Rules for Ruin. It's Effie's best friend at the Crinoline Academy. Her name's Nell
I
Truelove.
was wondering. Yeah, that's great.
And
Yeah.
the hero is Miles Quincy, who's
Ah.
the editor of the paper. So, oh my gosh, they were so much fun. It's very, I wouldn't say Nell is sunshine, but Miles
Uh-huh.
is definitely grumpy.
Yes, I
And
agree.
I like a grumpy, stoic hero who's ready to
Hmm.
sort of burn it all down for the heroine once he falls in love is
Yeah,
a really great trope. So
that's
hopefully
great.
readers will enjoy that.
I'm sure they will. That sounds super exciting. Wonderful. Well, folks, when this episode airs, Rules for Ruin will be out, so be sure to order your copy today. You can check out Mimi's website at mimimatthews.com. What social media outlets are you most active on, Mimi?
Right now, I would say Facebook, and Instagram. And on Facebook, I am at, let me just see, Mimi Matthews author, all
Okay.
sort of one. And then on Instagram, I'm at Mimi Matthews ESQ for Esquire, Mimi Matthews
Okay.
ESQ.
All right, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This was so much fun talking to you about this new series, this new book, and yeah, I can't wait for book two to come out towards the end of the year. That'll be great.
I'm so excited for you to read it. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun chatting with you, Tracy.
Absolutely, anytime. Many thanks to everyone listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Undercurrents of Romance. You can find more information about the show at tracydevlyn.com/podcast. Undercurrents of Romance is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. I'll be back soon with another great romantic read. In the meantime, enjoy the adventure, everyone.